Hi guys, welcome to today's video. Today we're looking at some more Canon news. We've got three stories to look at. One is super interesting at the end, the other two are still interesting, just not as good as that last one. So stick around to see what that third story is. So we have three news stories to talk about today. There's a new patent. There seems to be one almost every week at the moment from Canon. But this one is for an RFS 14-30 f4 to f6.3 IS STM PZ. So really good sort of landscape, wide angle, not a massively fast lens. Obviously it's for the RFS, so it's going to be one of those sort of more lower price budget zoom lenses. But there are a couple of examples of how it's going to look and where the f-stop's going to sit. They're going to sit around about the same. All the focal length's going to be the same, height pretty much there, but this is going to be sort of that, say, that cheaper zoom lens, which allows people to have that more wide angle side of things. So could be really useful if you're, say, getting into landscape photography and want something that should be fairly cheap. There is obviously no pricing on this, it's just a patent, but I wouldn't imagine this being a massively expensive lens. Now this lens could be something a bit more interesting to most of you guys, because you all seem to like those more bigger zoom lenses from what I read in the comments. But we're looking at potentially an RF 300 to 600. We did talk about a few different options. There was a 200 to 500 and also a 180 to, I think it was 500 off the top of my head, lenses they're all rumoring about. But this one is a 300 to 600 5.6 IS. Now could this be the big lens that will replace the 200 to 400 with the inbuilt teleconverter? I'd still prefer to see it more of an f4, so something like the 200 to 500 f4 here they're rumoring it, talking about, which is what we just discussed. But this could still be quite a nice lens. Say having that aperture of f5.6 all the way through could actually be a really nice example. It's not like a lot of the newer RF lenses that are zooms where you got f7, f11 and all this sort of thing on there. This will definitely be a nice high quality piece of equipment, being an L lens. So it could also be sort of rumouring now, because obviously Sigma just released their big telephoto lens, so that's why I prefer seeing it f4, so it matched the Sigma lens a little bit more. So let's hope they can do something about that. But say, yeah, to be a sort of a next step up from basically the 100 to 500, which has that max aperture of 7.1, it'll be really nice to have this sort of lens which is the same aperture all the way through. They're ranging, because being a 5.6, it could range between 5,000 and 6,000, which isn't too bad money wise considering what it is. Let's say if it were to end up being f4, you're going to look at a 10 grand lens, like the 200 to 400 to £13,500 lens being f4. So maybe they're looking at doing this sort of 100mm extra reach L lens, and it's going to cost a bit more, but it's going to be in a more pro body where it doesn't have it has an external zoom rather than external zoom like the 100 to 500, just to allow it to have that standard aperture all the way through. So an interesting one, could be a good lens to try when it comes out, if it comes out. It's all rumours now, as it always is, but is this a lens that you would be excited to see? And finally, something we've all been waiting for is there are some more rumoured specs for the R7 Mark II, which is still rumoured to make its debut the second half of 2025, so Q3 or Q4. If these specs are true, and what they're saying here is true, it could actually be a really nice camera and could be the R7 that we all wanted originally. So looking at a 40 megapixel sensor with an 8K video function. Don't care about the video function too much, but this part here is very interesting. So it's going to be a lightweight camera still, even though it has the high megapixels, but they're going to be looking at ergonomics like on the R5 Mark II, because the R7 is the only one to have its own individual layout, which I didn't mind too much. I got on with it pretty quickly, but it was my first mirrorless camera. Maybe if I went back to it now, I'll be a bit like, this is a bit weird, but if it had a similar body to the R5 Mark II, that would mean they can use the grips from the R5 Mark II. And that is, to me, the biggest thing. Apart from the readout speed as well, they would need to improve that readout speed to something a bit more similar to the R6. So you do have the option then of using the electronic shutter. At the moment with the R7 you can use that electronic shutter, but the rolling shutter is absolutely ridiculous because the readout speed is one of the slowest in the Canon range. So you end up, I used 30,000 shutters before I got rid of that camera and gave it to my dad, and I used it only in mechanical shutter the whole time, just because the first few tests I did with the electronic shutter, yes, it's a load faster, but you just get so much rolling shutter it becomes absolutely useless. And 15 frames per second on mechanical shutter isn't necessarily slow, so I got on with it like that. But if the specs look right, it's got the faster cards and everything as well to accommodate that bigger megapixels, so more data running through it. And also rumours, very strong rumours here by the looks of it, of a global shutter and an APC body that Canon want to put in there. And if that came out on there, the camera one is going to be over £2,000 for sure. Considering the R7 came out at $13,999 in the UK when I bought mine, it's already $14,499 now. That's another massive price hike. But if you've got the better body, you've got the bigger megapixels, faster readout speed, then maybe, if you've got global shutter in there, it's worth all day long to over £2,000, just over £2,000. So let's see. This is one that I'm highly anticipating and would love to get my hands on when it does release. And if it's got specs like this and can have a grip and all the things we're missing from the R7 Mark I, it would be one I'd be very, very tempted to pre-order, like I did with the R7. So what do you think of the news this week? Obviously we've got two new lenses there being rumoured. The 300 to 600 is more interesting to me because the type of photography I do. Again, I wish that was an f4 really, but I can understand that if that's an f4, that's going to be easily a £15,000 lens with how the market's looking. And it would be nice if they did do that sort of pro level lens, being an L lens, but in a cheaper format, so more people could have access to it. And say that sort of $5,000-6,000 mark, that does sort of carry it in a zone where it could definitely be interesting getting it as a lens to use and shoot on the R3. The more interesting story for me is the R7 news with the 40 megapixels, maybe having global shutter, all that sort of thing is very interesting. That'll be a camera, if it does have any of these specs and has that new body and it can have a grip, all that sort of thing. And I keep going about having a grip and a grip and a grip, but when you're using bigger lenses, it's so nice to have the grip on there just to balance out the bigger lens. And then also when you're then holding it, you can see it vertically, you're not having to put your hand awkwardly on top, you've got all the buttons and everything on there for you. And then also battery life, it's so important when you're shooting wildlife to have that extra battery life. You don't know how long you're going to be out there shooting photos for, and to carry batteries around, to have to switch them all around, you could miss something in that moment you're having to change your battery. So having the faster readout speed, having the faster cards, having that higher megapixels, everything is looking towards it being a really nice camera, and the R7 we should have had the first time. So fingers crossed, I really hope that is the case. If it is the case, it will be something I will definitely look at pre-ordering and having as a secondary to my R3 for most things before I try and get hold of an R5. So let me know your thoughts. Are you excited for the R7 Mark II, hopefully the end of this year? Is this something you'd look at buying, or do you want to see the finalized spec before you sort of kind of commit to that in yourself? What sort of specs are you hoping to see from that? And are you happy about that 300-600mm lens and the wide angle cheap lens as well? Because it is good, the more cheaper lenses that Canon make, the more volume of those can sell, and then the more money they have to develop nice new shiny kit for the rest of us. So I hope you enjoyed this news video, and I will catch you in the next one. See you later guys, cheers.